Previously on Sodor, the modern years.
Donald, are you alright?
I think so. Get me back on solid ground. It was just my usual run.
Go on.
As I came into the harbour, the trucks decided they wanted me to have a swim. This business with the trucks is beginning to get beyond a joke. Aye, it's beginning to get dangerous.
It is a fact that Diesel did put the trucks up to causing mischief on his first visit here. His experience of doing that could be useful. In that case, Diesel, I'm going to need your help.
I don't know anything about this business at all. I do have a certain skill when it comes to manipulation. Both of us know it has been useful before.
This sort of manipulation isn't the way we did things on the Great Western. So if someone is putting the trucks up to mischief, it needs to be stopped now. Whatever you come up with may be our best chance of doing that.
While Duck had been talking to Diesel in the main yard, Donald had decided to do some investigation of his own. At Ulsborough, he'd shunted aside a ballast hopper, one of the new ones that had arrived a couple of weeks ago. After dealing with the rest of his train, he then returned to the siding where he'd shunted the hopper.
Now, what's going on with you lot?
What are you talking about?
Donald bumped the hopper hard.
Oi! There's no call for that.
Did he play innocent?
Steady on, Donald.
Donald glared at Rex.
You've always told us how your ballast hoppers run smoothly, Rex.
Indeed they do.
Rex replied, not quite sure what Donald was getting at. The Scottish engine turned his attention back to the hopper.
Well, Dougie and I were talking this morning about the trouble we've been having recently. It's only started since these hoppers arrived.
If you're talking about that business at the harbour yesterday...
That's just the most recent one. One of you was on the next track when it happened, and another of you was in Oliver's train when he had that violent separation yesterday afternoon.
That's not our doing.
I find that hard to believe. As I said, this business only started after you lot arrived. 1 day after, to be precise. I don't think that's a coincidence.
Take a look at the numbers, then you'll see I'm telling the truth.
Donald peered closely at the hopper.
Take a look at the numbers.
That's what I said.
Very well, but then I think I won't be keeping a close eye on all of you.
Donald decided to leave it at that. After being turned, he departed for Tidmouth.
Driver, could I ask you to have a word with the yardmaster when we reach Tidmouth?
Of course. What do you need me to ask?
I'd like him to take a look at the switch lists for the delayed trains and see if there's any pattern to the trucks on them.
I'll start to do it. A couple of hours later, Duck had returned to Tidmouth, where Douglas was shunting.
So what did Diesel say?
Well, he did give me a bit of advice, and also asked me to find out if there was anything in common between the affected trains. So I'll have to talk to the yardmaster about it.
You won't have long to wait for that. Here he comes now.
Both engines looked over as the yardmaster strode up.
Excuse me, yardmaster. I was wondering if you could check something for me.
What would that be?
Well, we've been having a bit of trouble on the branch recently. Several trains have been delayed. Could you check the switch lists and see if they have anything in common?
Out of the 14 trains that have been delayed over the last 2 weeks, 9 have had Hopper 006 in them, and 4 others had Hopper 003.
Duck and Douglas blinked.
That was quick.
Your twin asked me to look at this too, just before he headed out about an hour ago.
I see. Do you think those 2 hoppers could be causing our trouble?
It's likely. I mean, most of the other hoppers haven't had many delays on their trains at all.
The 2 steam engines exchanged a look.
Douglas, we need to tell Diesel this as soon as possible.
Donald's heading down to Knapford now. Driver, could you message his driver?
I'm ahead of you, Douglas. Message sent.
Thank you, driver.
A moment later, Duck left to get a drink. As he chuffed off, the Great Western engine couldn't help wondering what Diesel would come up with. A short while later, Donald arrived at the main yards and stopped next to Diesel.
Morning, Diesel.
Morning, Donald. Just shut those into track 3, please. I'll sort them out later.
Aye. By the way, I've got some information for you.
Oh? Do tell.
My driver got a text.
Donald said, and he filled Diesel in. Interesting, Diesel replied when the Scottish engine had finished. As I told Duck, keep an eye on those two hoppers. Listen carefully for any talk of jokes or pranks. I'll be taking action to minimize these disruptions on your branch, while I figure out how to stop them for good.
What action would that be?
I'll let you know once I've worked it out myself.
Aye, well, I hope you didn't take too long. I don't want to have another near accident.
Indeed. Speaking of accidents, I seem to recall hearing that one of you destroyed a brake van when you first arrived. A brake van who'd been causing trouble for Douglas.
Aye, but that was quite a while ago.
Even so, could you tell me what happened? Donald did so, recounting how Douglas had accidentally crushed the spiteful brake van while banking James up Gordon's Hill.
Seems he was one of the older, wood-framed brake vans. Dougie didn't realise that at the time.
I see. Thank you, Donald.
You're welcome.
Donald replied as he headed off to shunt his trucks. He couldn't see how that was relevant. Diesel continued his shunting, considering what Donald had told him. Now that he had something to work with, some ideas were coming to mind. He'd have to talk to Hopper 006, of course, but the main goal now was to prevent any further incidents. A whistle sounded out, cutting through Diesel's thoughts. He smiled as Peter arrived. Ah, Peter, you'll be perfect.
I don't know about perfect, but I do try my best. Penny for your thoughts?
I was thinking about that trouble that's been occurring recently on the Wildnorwester.
I've heard they're having a bit of bad luck, but how do I come into this?
Duck asked me for help, and I think we can stop at least some of the mischief. But I'll need your assistance.
Of course, Diesel. What do you need me to do?
Peter listened carefully as Diesel outlined his plan.
Are you sure that would work?
He asked, once Diesel had finished. It should at least cause the trucks to pause for thought.
Very well, I'll do it as soon as I can.
Thank you. Peter departed a moment later, and Diesel resumed his shunting. Peter didn't get a chance to put Diesel's plan into motion until later that afternoon, when he arrived at Tidmouth with the return goods from Barrow. As he stopped next to Douglas, he noticed that the Scottish engine seemed rather annoyed.
Is everything all right, Douglas?
No, it's no. We've had a derailment just down from Callan.
The trucks...
Aye.
I must say, I am a bit surprised by that. I mean, between you and Oliver, I'm surprised the trucks are even willing to try causing trouble.
What do you mean, Peter?
Well, I have heard a couple of tales. Something about a brake van being crushed, and then a truck being pulled apart.
Where did you hear about that brake van? That was years ago.
Oh, Diesel mentioned it.
Douglas stared at Peter for a moment.
Did he now?
Yes, we were discussing it this morning. That was the last time they gave you real trouble, wasn't it?
Oh, aye. But they play up every now and then.
Douglas looked closely at Peter.
It was an accident, let me make that clear. Donald had words with the brake van and he behaved for a while, but he was soon back to his old tricks. Unfortunately, he got caught between me and the trucks holding James back.
I see.
Both engines paused for a moment. Instead of silence, however, what they heard was a soft yet frantic murmuring coming from the trucks. The two engines exchanged a knowing look, but it was another voice that spoke up.
Mr. Peter, I think you asked about Mr. Oliver's accident with Scruffy as well.
Peter looked back.
That's right. It's Toad, isn't it?
That's right, Mr. Peter. I must admit, unlike Mr. Douglas's accident with the brake van, this accident was a little bit more deliberate.
Oh? How so?
We lined up the worst of the trucks. Scruffy was at the front. He told them to hold back, and they did. But Mr. Oliver didn't. Good for discipline is what Sir Topham Hatt called it.
Peter and Douglas glanced over at the sightings, from which they could still hear worried chatter.
Aye, but trucks these days.
Oh, I know. They don't learn, do they? Anyway, I need to get going. Douglas, Toad, it was nice talking to the pair of you.
With that, Peter departed. For the rest of that day, and all of the next, things ran smoothly on the Little Western. Trains were on time, and there was virtually no trouble from the trucks at all. One morning, a couple of days after Peter had spoken to Douglas, Diesel was arriving in the yard to start the day's work. It was still quite early, and there weren't many engines or people about. As he moved through the yard, Diesel heard a voice drifting through the cool morning air.
Have some guts, for crying out loud!
Driver, I think we'd better coast in. Diesel's driver agreed, and cut the engine. Both locomotive and human listened carefully.
Some shunters in every which way. We owe them a few bumps in return.
You've been saying that since you arrived, 006. We have been having fun, remember? But the engines on that branch have destroyed trucks that caused trouble.
Unseen by the trucks, Diesel smirked. It seemed that his plan was working after all.
They were talking about it the other day at Tidmouth.
Those are just old guards' tales.
Oh, I wouldn't say that. Both of those events were chronicled, in full detail, by the thin clergyman. They happened.
I wasn't talking to you. Mind your own business.
This is my business. Diesel paused, considering his next words carefully. It's not so easy when they're unwilling to take risks, is it?
I don't know what you're talking about.
You owe us a few bumps in return. Isn't that what you were saying earlier? Surely you'd want to administer a few of those bumps yourself. But getting the other trucks to do your dirty work means less danger for you.
It's not like that.
Isn't it? You get the satisfaction of causing trouble, and the other trucks get to take all the risk. Now that they've realized the danger, it won't be so easy for you.
I can still find other trucks who won't realize that. I'll still be able to send a message to you engines.
We'll see about that. Now I've got work to do. With that, Diesel headed off to continue his shunting. As he did so, he heard the trucks start to argue behind him. But even so, Diesel knew this wasn't over yet. Hopper 006 had seemed pretty determined to send a message. As much as Diesel didn't like it, he had to admit that the Hopper did have a point about finding other trucks. No, he thought, this trouble wouldn't stop until Hopper 006 had been completely dealt with. The question now was how to do that.